John 1:17. Quia lex per Mosem data est, gratia et veritas per Iesum Christum facta est. Since, or because, the law was or has been given through Moses, here we've got to supply a slight break in the sense, perhaps like a semicolon or a comma. Grace and truth through Jesus Christ have come about, or have come. You'll remember now in the last verse, John has said, we all have received from his fullness, namely, we have all received from his fullness grace upon grace, or grace instead of grace. And now in these two clauses, because again, we've got to supply some kind of pause in the grammar here, where we would have punctuation if this were a modern English text. We've got in the reading of some two kinds of grace, and that's why they interpret verse 16 to be grace instead of grace, or grace in place of grace, rather than the more popular reading, which is grace upon grace, grace in addition to grace. Those readers see this here as grace number one, the law that was given through Moses, which pointed forward to a better and greater grace that was going to be made available by God through Christ. And that fullness of grace in God's timing to be here expressed in the second clause, grace and truth, which came about or came into existence through Jesus Christ, per Iesum Christum. So that just explains that earlier reading, which I promised we would talk about. Let's look back, though, just at more down-to-earth features in the grammar here. Quia, of course, is our causative conjunction explaining, listen, here's the reason for what I've just said. We could just as easily have said quod in the Vulgate, since or because. Lex is our subject. The law, this is a feminine third declension noun, lex legis. And that's why we have data instead of datus or datum here. Remember, when we've got our perfect passive system in play, here from do dare, we need to take our fourth principal part and make sure it matches the subject in number here, and here as well, in both number and in gender. So, lex data est, the law was given or has been given. So here for data est, we've got a third person singular, perfect, passive, indicative, which we would translate was given or has been given. The law has been given, lex data est, per Mosem, through Moses. And here, per, as usual, takes the accusative case. But why Mosem? What explains this unusual form? Well, obviously, the easiest way to explain this is simply by pointing out that this is a foreign word. This is not a word that's Latin in origin. It's a Hebrew word. But why should it form its accusative in N, you may wonder? Well, it's kind of a complicated story, but the short answer is this is how Greek nouns were declined in the Latin language. When Latin authors or translators wanted to use Greek words, they didn't completely conform them to the Latin case system. They declined them according to a Greek pattern. And Moses here, this name first entered the Latin language via Greek, via the example of the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint. And so it's declined like a Greek noun would be, Mosem, in the accusative case. If you look up Greek nouns in your Latin grammar, if you have one of the larger, more scholarly Latin grammars, there will be a section there laying out some paradigms by which Greek nouns are declined in Latin, and you'll see that this follows one of those patterns. So don't be troubled by it. Now there's a pause here in the grammar. Again, let's say that we'd supply an English comma here. Since the law was given through Moses, but we would almost be tempted to supply grace, gratia, and truth, veritas, have come about, facta est, and I'm translating it like that because these words render Greek egeneto And we've seen that before in previous verses. This is a somewhat idiosyncratic use of facio facere in the passive voice. Again, don't be too concerned by it. Our translator, our Latin translator here, is trying very hard to get as close to the Greek as he can, even down to emulating the use of a singular verb with two subjects. We could also expect a plural verb, but instead we get facta est, matching the singular number of agenita, as though this verb is describing gratia and veritas each individually. And don't forget, we've seen gratia and veritas not very long ago. We were just talking about the verbum Dei, who was full of grace and truth. And here John is picking up on those words again. And facta est, just like data est, facta has got to match the number and gender of those nouns it's modifying. In this case, these are both feminine singular. One gratia of the first declension and veritas of the third declension. And those are the subjects of facta est, just like data est, third person singular, perfect passive indicative. Per, again, we'll notice causing the accusative in Jesum and Christum.